In the time when the world was still soft at its edges, when the spirits of the dead walked as familiarly as the living along the narrow sun-drenched footpaths between homesteads, there existed the village of Umoa. It was a good village, cradled in the palm of the green rolling hills of the Igbo heartland. The earth here was a deep, vibrant red, the color of life and sacrifice. The forests were thick and whispered with ancient secrets, and the rivers ran clear and cold, singing songs of the ancestors. In Umoa, life moved to the sacred rhythm of the seasons, the planting of the yam, the tending of the cassava, the harvesting of the maize, and the great festivals that thanked Chuku, the great god, for his bounty. Food here was more than sustenance, it was communion. It was the shared pounded yam and bitter leaf soup in a family obi, the laughter of women roasting corn over open fires at dusk, the kola nut broken and shared to welcome a guest. The taste of a mother's soup was the taste of home, of identity, of love made tangible. It was a simple truth, as unchanging as the course of the sun. Until the day Mam Kiru arrived, and the very meaning of taste was corrupted. She came on the day of the Nkwo market, when the air buzzed with the commerce of 4 villages. At first, no one noticed her. She was just a woman of indeterminate age, her frame wrapped in a clean, sun-faded wrapper of indigo and white. She carried a large soot-blackened pot balanced expertly on her head, a folded wooden stool in one hand, and a woven basket in the other. Her face was neither young nor old, but it held a serenity that was deeply compelling, and her smile, it was a gentle, unwavering thing that seemed to promise understanding without a single word spoken. She approached the council of elders who sat under the ancient Ukwa tree, their faces etched with the wisdom of decades. She bowed deeply, her voice a soft, melodic stream. "Ndibe anyị, fathers of this great village," she began. "I am Kiru, a widow from a distant land. My journey has been long, and my feet seek rest. I ask for no land, no house, only a small space by the roadside, near the market, where I may cook and sell food to sustain my humble life. I will pay my dues to the village and bring no trouble." Her manner was so respectful, her request so modest, that the elders, led by the gray-headed Ezeudo, saw no harm. Permission was granted. She chose a spot under the generous shade of an old mango tree, where the path from the farms met the main road to the market. She arranged her stool, set her pot on a tripod of stones, and built a small, neat fire. The villagers went about their business, casting only curious glances at the new arrival. Then she began to cook. It started as a whisper on the wind, a scent so profound, so layered, it seemed to bypass the nose and speak directly to the soul. It was the deep, earthy promise of well-seasoned goat meat, yet lifted with a hint of wild forest herbs no one could name. It carried the richness of palm oil, but with a smoky, nutty depth that was unfamiliar. It was the aroma of perfectly fried plantain, but sweeter, as if caramelized with honey from a forgotten hive. The smell did not just drift, it invaded. It wound its way through the market stalls, overpowering the scent of fresh fish and ripe oranges. It traveled down the footpaths, causing farmers returning from their plots to halt, their hoes slipping from their shoulders. It slipped into homesteads where women preparing the evening meal paused, their own ingredients suddenly seeming bland in comparison. By mid-afternoon, a crowd had gathered around the mango tree, not a noisy, demanding crowd, but a quiet, almost reverent one, drawn by a hunger they did not know they possessed. Mam Kiru, still wearing that tranquil smile, began to serve. For a few cowrie shells, one received a generous portion of a stew that defied description, a deep, reddish-brown concoction with tender morsels of meat and strange, delicious mushrooms served with a mound of fluffy white gari that tasted of coconut and sunshine. The first man to eat, a young farmer named Dike, took a bite and tears sprang to his eyes. He said, it tastes like joy," he stammered, "like the memory of my happiest childhood feast." Word spread like wildfire. That evening, Mam Kiru's pot was scraped clean by eager hands, and as the sun set, she banked her fire, covered her pot, and gave that same gentle smile to all. "Come tomorrow," she said, "there will be more." Within weeks, Mam Kiru was not just food seller, she was the beating heart of Umoa. Her spot under the mango tree became the village's center of gravity. Men finished their work early to queue. Women hurried through their chores. Children performed extra errands, their reward a taste of Mam Kiru's magic. Travelers from neighboring villages began to make detours, and stories of the miraculous cook of Umoa spread across the land. Her prices remained absurdly low, a gesture she explained with downcast eyes. "I am a childless widow. What need have I for wealth? To see full bellies and happy faces is my payment." But a poison, subtle and sweet as her food, began to seep into the fabric of Umoa. It started in the homes. "Ne, the food is ready," a wife would call to her husband in the evening, having labored over the family pot. "Do not trouble yourself, my wife. I am not hungry," the husband would reply, his breath still carrying the fragrant ghost of Mam Kiru's stew. Wives compared themselves to the stranger, their confidence withering. A woman's prowess in the kitchen was her pride, the cornerstone of her marital harmony. Now their most cherished recipes tasted like ash. Arguments, once rare, became common. "You spend our money there every day," Amara shouted to her husband, Obina. "Do I not cook for you? Has my food become poison?" "Your food is food, woman," Obina retorted, his craving making him cruel. Hers is a different thing entirely. It is like medicine for my spirit." Fights broke out under the mango tree, not for her attention, but for the last serving. Friends became rivals, siblings squabbled. The communal spirit of sharing that had defined Umoa was replaced by frantic individualistic hunger. Yet through it all, Mam Kiru remained a picture of calm benevolence. She never raised her voice, never showed favoritism, and mysteriously, no matter how many she fed, her pot never truly emptied. There was always just enough, a bottomless well of delicious deceit. In a modest hut at the edge of the village lived Chuku Dimma with his parents and his father's mother, Neoma. His name meant God is good, but from the moment of his birth, the village knew Chuku Dimma was marked by something beyond the name. He had been born with a full head of hair, fine and soft as silk, but the color of ironwood ash. It was not the white of albinism, but the stark, dignified gray of an elder who has seen 80 decades. The midwife had gasped. The diviners were summoned. After days of consultation with the ancestral spirits and the oracles, the verdict was solemnly delivered to the family and the village elders. Konkweya, the oldest diviner, his voice crackling like dry leaves, pronounced, "This child, he did not come here to learn, he came here to remember. His spirit is ancient, and his eyes see the fabric of the world, not just its patterns. He carries a wisdom that does not belong to a child. Respect him, listen to him, for he will see truths that our hunger and our thirst will blind us to." As Chuku Dimma grew, so did the signs. A child wailing with a fever would fall silent when Chuku Dimma placed his small hand on a burning forehead, the sickness retreating by morning. Two men on the verge of blows over a land dispute would find their anger cooling if the gray-haired boy simply walked between them, his strange, too knowing eyes looking from one face to the other. Elders, in their most serious deliberations, would sometimes pause and ask, "What does the small old one think?" But one habit of Chuku Dimma baffled and even annoyed the village. He absolutely, resolutely refused to eat Mam Kiru's food. When the other children ran gleefully to the mango tree with their cowries, Chuku Dimma would sit with his grandmother, Neoma, eating her simple good soup of vegetables and fish. The villagers teased him mercilessly. "Chuku Dimma, are your taste buds sleeping? Maybe his old man hair means he has no teeth for good meat. He thinks he is too holy for us, this one." Chuku Dimma never argued. He would simply offer his quiet, unnerving smile and say nothing. One evening, after a particularly loud celebration where the village had feasted on Mam Kiru's food until they were drowsy with delight, Chuku Dimma sat with his grandmother, Neoma, by their cooking fire. The village was silent, sated. Neoma, a woman whose own face was a map of kindness and patience, studied her extraordinary grandson. "My child," she began softly, stirring the embers. "The whole village eats from that woman's pot, even your mother and father, though they hide it from you. Your refusal shouts in their silence. Tell your old grandmother, what do your seeing eyes see that our hungry mouths cannot taste?" Chuku Dimma gazed into the fire, the flames reflecting in his deep, solemn eyes. He did not speak like a child. "Neoma," he said, his voice low, "the tongue is a foolish chief. It celebrates what the spirit should mourn. That pot under the mango tree does not cook with fire from our hearths. Its flavor does not come from our earth or our rivers." He turned to look at her, and in that moment she saw not her grandson, but the ancient soul the diviners had spoken of. "There is a hunger in our people, grandmother, a hunger for more, for easier joy, for a taste that replaces feeling. She is not feeding that hunger. She is feeding on it. What she serves is not food. It is a beautiful chain." A cold dread, deeper than any she had known, settled in Neoma's belly. "What must we do?" "The truth must be shown, not told," Chuku Dimma said, "for words are now weaker than taste in Umoa. Tonight I will follow. My eyes must witness what her magic hides." Long before the first cockcrow, when the world was a tapestry of deep blues and the moon was a sliver of cold silver, Chuku Dimma slipped from his mat. He stood at the edge of the compound, his small form still, his senses stretching into the sleeping village. He felt it, a subtle disturbance in the air, a movement out of rhythm with the night. He saw a shadow detach itself from the deeper shadow under the mango tree and glide silently toward the path that led into the forbidden part of the forest, the place where children were warned not to play, where the woods grew too thick for sunlight. With the silence of his spirit himself, Chuku Dimma followed. The forest at night was a different realm. The friendly chirping of crickets was gone, replaced by the low hum of unseen life and the occasional piercing shriek of a night bird. The path was barely visible, but Mam Kiru moved with unerring certainty, her dark form floating between the giant trunks of iroko and mahogany. Chuku Dimma's heart thumped against his ribs, but his steps were steady, guided by the inner sight that was his birthright. They walked for what felt like hours, deep into the forest's belly, to a small, gloomy clearing where a sickly-looking stream trickled over black rocks. The air here was cold and smelled of damp earth and decay. No birds sang. This was a place the life of the forest avoided. Here, Mam Kiru stopped. She set down her basket and her ever-present pot. She knelt by the stream, but not to draw water. From the folds of her wrapper, she produced a small dark gourd. She uncorked it and began to chant. The words were not ego. They were guttural, ancient, a language of twisting shadows and broken promises. As she chanted, she poured a thick, viscous liquid from the gourd into the stream.
The water bubbled and churned, and then from the mud of the stream bank, from under rotten leaves, they began to emerge. Fat, white, wriggling masses of maggots. They crawled on one another, a seething, pulsating wave of corruption. But these were not ordinary maggots. Each one glowed with a faint, sickly green phosphorescence, like rotten wood in the dark. Mama Kiru smiled, her serene smile now looking grotesque in the ghastly light. She began to gather them into her basket with her bare hands, her chanting never ceasing. As she collected them, the chant changed, weaving a new spell. The maggots, touched by her words and the liquid from the god, began to transform. Their wriggling bodies shimmered, their putrid glow dimmed, and they took on the appearance of plump fresh mushrooms, ripe budding eggs, and tender pieces of meat. Chuku Dimma, hidden behind a massive tree root, felt a nausea that had nothing to do with his stomach. It was a spiritual revulsion. He was seeing the inversion of creation itself. She was weaving a powerful ajogu, a dark enchantment that twisted corruption into desire, that made the vile seem delicious. Her magic did not create food, it disguised filth and fed it to the hungry, feeding in turn on their blind pleasure, on the slow erosion of their will and their community. She saw her place the enchanted mass into her pot. With a final whispered command, the illusion settled. The pot now smelled, even from this distance, like the irresistible feast the village craved. The transformation was complete. As Mama Kiru turned to leave, Chuku Dimma melted back into the forest, his spirit heavy with the terrible truth. It was worse than he imagined. The village was not just being deceived, it was being consumed, soul first. The next day was Eke Market, the biggest of the week. The air was festive, but the undercurrent was one of frantic anticipation for Mama Kiru's midday serving. The crowd under the mango tree was larger than ever, tense with competitive hunger. Chuku Dimma walked through the throng, his grey hair a stark banner. People nudged each other, scoffing at his approach. Mama Kiru was serving, her smile beatific, her movements graceful as she ladled the bewitching stew. She saw Chuku Dimma, and her smile flickered for less than a heartbeat. A shadow passed behind her eyes, a crack in the serene mask. She quickly looked away. Chuku Dimma did not go to the back of the queue. He walked straight to the front, standing beside the pot itself. A murmur of disapproval arose. "Boy, know your place. Has your oddness made you rude as well?" Dike, the farmer, now a devoted regular, stepped forward. "Move, Chuku Dimma. Do not interrupt our blessing." Chuku Dimma looked not at Dike, but at the villagers, his clear, old young voice cutting through the noise. "People of Umoa, fathers, mothers, brothers, and sisters, hear me now, not as a child, but as the one who sees." The crowd fell silent, more from shock at his audacity than respect. You believe you are being fed, but you are being eaten. You think you taste goodness, but you swallow decay. This, he pointed at the simmering pot, is not food, it is a lie made for your tongue to believe, so your spirit may be blinded. Anger erupted. Blasphemy! He insults Mama Kiru's kindness. Throw him out. Mama Kiru spoke, her voice still soft, but now with an edge of honeyed venom. "My child, grief has clouded your mind. Come, taste and see that I mean no harm." She held out a ladle full of the fragrant, tempting, treacherous peace offering. Chuku Dimma looked at the ladle, then at her. "You offer me the corruption of the forest stream, the enchanted filth you gathered in the dead of night." A gasp went through the crowd. Mama Kiru's face went perfectly still. The smile did not leave, but it became a stiff, carved thing. Without another word, Chuku Dimma reached out. He did not touch the ladle. He stretched his small hand over the open mouth of the large black pot. He closed his eyes, and from his lips came not a chant of dark power, but a prayer of pure, piercing light, a plea to the ancestors, to the true forces of creation, to strip away illusion and reveal the essence. "Chuku, show us what our hearts have hidden from our eyes." He touched the rim of the cloth. A ripple went through the air. The delicious aroma vanished, replaced in an instant by a stomach-churning stench of putrefaction, of damp rot and spoiled meat. The pot's contents shimmered like a mirage. The rich red stew dissolved. The tender meat and vegetables melted away. What lay boiling in the pot was a heaving, seething mass of giant white maggots, glowing with that same sickly green light. They tumbled over each other in the hot liquid, some bursting, their insides a vile pus. For a moment, there was absolute stunned silence. Then, chaos. A unified scream of terror and disgust tore from the crowd. People stumbled back, vomiting, clawing at their mouths as if to scrape out the remembered taste. Bowls were thrown away. Dike, the farmer, now a devoted regular, looked at his hands, which had just been holding a portion, and fainted clean away. Women wailed. Men roared in betrayal and horror. All eyes turned to Mama Kiru. Her mask had finally shattered. The gentle smile was gone, replaced by a snarl of pure unmasked venom. Her eyes, once warm, were pits of black anger. She hissed, her voice now a grating screech, "You meddlesome ancient whelp, you have broken my feast." As the enraged villagers, led by a recovered and furious Dike, surged forward to seize her, Mama Kiru raised her hands to the sky. She screamed words in that same guttural, forbidding tongue, a spell of unmaking. From her feet erupted a thick, choking smoke, black as a moonless midnight and cold as a grave. It billowed out, engulfing the market stall, the mango tree, and the screaming crowd. People coughed and staggered, blind and disoriented in the sudden unnatural darkness. Chuku Dimma stood firm in the muck, his gray hair a faint beacon. He did not cough. He watched with his spirit eyes. He saw her form dissolve within the smoke, not fleeing into the forest, but unraveling like a thread pulled from a loom. The pot, the stool, the basket, all of it crumbled into dust and was swallowed by the earth. The black smoke coiled in on itself with a sound like a sigh of immense regret, and then it was simply gone. The sun shone brightly again on the Umoa market. The villagers, pale and trembling, looked around. The mango tree stood as always, but the space beneath it was empty. No pot, no stool, no firestones, no Mam Kiru. There was no sign she had ever existed, save for the lingering, acrid memory of the dark smoke and the profound, gut-wrenching betrayal in their hearts and in their stomachs. The days that followed in Umoa were not peaceful. They were haunted. The physical hunger returned, but it was a clean hunger for real yam and real fish. The deeper hunger was a sickness of the soul. Husbands looked at their wives with shame. Wives looked at their cooking pots with doubt. The memory of the taste was now forever fused with the image of the writhing maggots, a psychological scar that turned appetite to ash. It took months for the village to heal. Families ate together in silence at first, then gradually with rediscovered gratitude. The simple, honest flavor of a properly made okra soup became a treasure. The communal spirit, though bruised, began to regrow, stronger for having been so terribly tested. Chuku Dimma never spoke of it again unless asked by the elders. He resumed his life, his strange wisdom now revered with a dose of fearful awe. He had not just saved their bodies from corruption, he had saved their community from a consumption far more total than any famine. The story of Mam Kiru and the gray-haired boy became the most important cautionary tale of Umoa and all the lands that heard it. It was woven into the rites of passage, told to children not as a mere scare, but as a foundational truth. And so, the elders would say, their voices grave with the weight of memory. My child, let your heart be your first tongue. Obula ihe na totu abuhiezi. Not everything sweet is clean. The most tempting feast may be a famine for the spirit. The easiest joy often carries the heaviest price. Remember the boy with old eyes who saw the truth in the pot. Remember that true nourishment comes not from magic that disguises rot, but from labor, love, and the clean, honest harvest of our own red earth. For a hunger that seeks to bypass the heart will always, in the end, feed on the soul. And the listener, feeling a chill that had nothing to do with the wind, would nod, understanding that this was more than a story about food. It was a story about the very essence of desire, community, and the eternal vigilance required to preserve what is truly real.